Welcome everybody to another episode of Talk Bridal to Me. I am here with Emily Poole today. She is a photographer in the Pacific Northwest who is smitten with storytelling, and I think you're really going to love what you hear today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yay! Thank you. I'm new to this and excited to be here. So
Absolutely. Well, I was going over your questionnaire that you had filled out, and I could tell just like it felt like this woven string throughout it of just like you're so empathetic and you're so into your clients, not just from a photography perspective, but who they are, and you're so encapsulated with capturing that. And I think that's so beautiful.
it's like each person, I'm just so fascinated by their unique story, but also just their characteristics, where they come from, what built them as a person, and all of that just flows into whether it be their wedding or their family photos. And so yeah, it's fun to ask questions, which is podcasts are fun too. You could ask questions all day.
Oh yeah, and I'm that person that's like totally
fascinated. Yeah.
Totally all about you, and so it's really fun to be able to have the opportunity to do that.
Cool, thank you.
Yes, and I know your background. You had come from a family who was primarily in healthcare, am I right? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then you got started with photography, so tell us a little bit about how that all started.
Yeah, so definitely came from a family of healthcare people. My dad was a family practice doctor, so some people, when they'd find out that my dad was a doctor, they'd think one thing, but my dad actually was at home a lot. So even though he was in healthcare, he had a lot of time every evening he was home, and they were both my parents are artists in other forms. Like my dad was always making something in his workshop, and then my mom is a painter. So I grew up in a household of careers that were in healthcare, but also art was there. So yeah, I guess I had this vision that healthcare would be my profession, maybe, or just I saw a path to that. And then I'd have these artistic hobbies, so that's where I started. And then, so I went to school first, the sciences, like nerdy stuff like organic chemistry and those sort of things. And then was working towards being a physician's assistant. So you have to get like 2,000 hours of clinical care, hands-on care, to be a physician's assistant. And so in order to do that, I had to become like a phlebotomist, drawing people's blood. And I worked as a medical assistant for a while. But you have to get a lot of hours of care and before you can even apply to school. So that's kind of the process that I was in when I really fell in love with stories. But yeah. So I don't know if you want me to keep going, kind of what led on to.
I would love to hear, because I know you spent some time in Africa.
Yeah, so that was part of my clinical hours were there. There was a small rural hospital in Chad, Africa. So it's kind of in the middle of the Saharan desert. And this particular hospital had volunteer positions where you could come and work in that hospital. And they would place you with a family while you were living there and working. So even though I was at the hospital in the days, I would come home to a local family who rented me one of their mud huts. So that was, they were, even though I was at the hospital doing that, I also had a very like present place in a community, which I think is what sustained me, because the hospital honestly was just hard. And I found that, we were talking about being an empath and like feeling everything really deeply. And so that sciencey realm, that healthcare realm where you're seeing people suffering every day, a lot of stuff you can't control, out there in the bush, especially where there's not like a lot of resources. But then I would come back to the stories of this family, and they would, we'd sleep on mats out there, and we'd go to the river, and the mother of the family, it's actually a generational living situation. So there's 19 people, and they all had their huts like in a circle. And then they raised the kids together. So like they rotated who cooked, because you're cooking over a fire. And so that side of things I really fell in love with. Like I was there to do the sciencey, the healthcare things, but I really fell in love with the stories. And while I was there, I was keeping a journal, and I had my first camera there actually. And that's when I really started taking pictures and exploring what telling stories meant there in Chad. So
wow.
came back from there to shorten the story, and really felt like healthcare, I was going to crumble if I had to be in charge of people's lives my whole life, and people sometimes say, well, Emily, like now you're in one of the most stressful jobs ever, like capturing somebody's wedding, and I just say, well, it's just so different. People's stress versus like life and death stress. People's stress is just, it's about connections. It's about, understanding and that thing. Whereas in the healthcare setting, it felt like a different level of stress of things I couldn't necessarily control. Not that you can control wedding days either, but yeah, a different kind of stress. So I came back from Chad, and I had actually an apartment picked out for PA school. I was accepted in Portland, and just decided, this is not the right fit. And it was a big decision for me because I'd worked really hard towards it. But after I finally wrote that letter and said, I'm not going to take this spot in PA school, I felt so much relief and peace. Still didn't really know where I was headed next, but I knew that this creative realm was really calling me in a lot of ways. And so I ended up, my journal from that year was actually put into a little book, and I got the chance to share some of those stories about that village. And that experience about telling somebody's story and this family who lived there and all the different elements that were at play there was super fun for me. And I got to take, the family had sent me home with tons of their local tea. So everywhere I would share about it, we would have tea and from this family. And actually that was they could buy a package of tea, and then I'd send the money back to that family. But that experience told me telling other people's stories is where I want to be. So I ended up doing a master's in creative writing in LA, and you can specialize in different areas, but for me, nonfiction was always just, I was never good at making something up, like these fictional, people who can write fiction. I'm like, where did all of that come from? I loved nonfiction where you are looking at something real in front of you, you're watching this and you're teasing out pieces and putting them together. So I studied nonfiction there at Antioch University in LA, and then worked in writing for a couple of years. And one of the jobs was telling stories for a medical school. So I'd travel around the country and kind of feature their alumni in stories. And they sent me with a camera too, because they were like, well, since you're going to be writing this story, take the camera too. Yeah. So I ended up shooting quite a bit in that job. And from there, I kind of developed some of those skills. But it really wasn't until I got engaged myself, and my husband, we were both into photography. In fact, we co-shot in my first years. Yeah, we were a husband-wife team. He loved photography too. So in dating, we did that. And when he proposed, he gave me this ring, but then also he gave me my first super nice lens. I didn't have a lot of nice gear, but he gave me them at the same time. And he was it's just kind of a sign that he wanted to support me in my roles. I know, right? It was so thoughtful. It was so thoughtful. So he's always been very supportive, and just, he's very talented, artist in many ways, even though he's not working in art right now. But yeah, so he gave me my first lens, and I shot my first wedding with him. That was, and I did portraits first and things, and then somebody asked us to shoot their wedding, and we're like, oh, we've never done that before. Yeah, so that was eight years ago, and then now we have 3 kids, so when I get asked to shoot a wedding, if they need a second, if there's a second photographer involved, most of the time, Tommy, my husband, has to go be dad, and I go shoot, because it's just a lot to do both, but I bring along another friend. But yeah, that's how I got, did I get there? We got there. Yeah. That's how I got to photography. And from there, editing and that sort of process of storytelling to me is much easier in this phase of life too. Writing actually takes a ton of brain space, a ton of time where you're going to be focused, and editing you can kind of pick up and put down, which is just really great for this phase.
Yeah.
So,
wow.
Yeah.
How neat. Were your parents, how did they feel when you were like, I'm not going to do PA school. I'm going to pursue this.
Yeah. So they were awesome. I mean, I feel like every parent is like kind of on the edge of their seat. Like kids, like make sure that you can support yourself. Like, go, make sure you're making decisions that are going to set you up. So I think in some ways they wanted to make sure that, I was making these decisions best for me. But I really feel like they understood that was a part of me and my experience there in Chad and in healthcare in general. I worked in a few places in the States too. And I just always was waiting to be off work, and the weight of, caring for people in life and death settings was just, and I think you can always find areas in healthcare. So in hindsight, I'm like, I probably could have found something that didn't weigh on me in that same way. But yeah, my parents were supportive and like I said, they're artists. So they've been such supportive people in my life. My mom, I grew up with the rule of thirds. Like she was always talking about paintings, and she'd have our dining room table full of paintings and sketches. And, so I was always hearing about mixing colors and all of that. And so they get it. And yet it's not where they went with theirs. Although my mom is an artist, but my dad was in medicine. So yeah.
Wow. I think of all the stories that I've heard of, because I love hearing, and you probably get asked as well, like, how did you get into photography? Like, I feel like every time I'm doing makeup, it's like, how did you get into makeup?
Yeah.
And hearing how people got into it, I think, kind of sets them on this trajectory in their business and gives so much more meaning as to why you do what you do and the meaning behind your work. Because I do feel like people who have a strong backstory as their why, it comes through in their work. You can always tell when somebody is just like, I love it.
Yeah.
You can look at the page on your website.
Oh, thank you.
Your Instagram, and you can be like, wow, Emily has this eye for things, but you shoot in such a way where you portray emotion. And I think it is because of your empathetic nature. You're like, oop, there's a moment.
Yeah, I'm glad. Like, I think that I always felt in healthcare like that empathetic side was almost like my downfall, and it's nice to be in a profession where I feel like it's actually my strength, like being empathetic is what can help me tell a story better, so yeah.
And I don't think empathy is ever a downfall.
Yes, you're right. You're so right. And I guess in that, I meant that I just could not carry that weight for in a profession daily. But you're right. Empathy is never a downfall. And I hope every healthcare worker I know, and I know they do have massive amounts of empathy. So I just really admire when people can care for somebody and be in the face of suffering like that and continue on and carry the rest of their life too. It's really incredible.
Yes. Well, and my husband's in law enforcement, and he's told me, he's like, I don't tell you half the things I've seen. And I'm like, yeah, please don't.
Yeah.
and I don't know how he can separate some of the things he's seen and come home at the end of the day and
still stay soft and
stay soft and not just be like, what is wrong with them?
Jaded and yes. Yeah. No, I do think that's something probably learned as well. And that's what in hindsight, I'm like, I probably could have learned that piece. I was thrown into the electricity at this little hospital went off at midnight because they didn't have, it was on a, like, only solar powered. So we worked with headlamps at night for the night shift. So it's very like nothing you can really do for people except give their meds, take their vitals. There's very limited, and now they have a little bit more resources at that hospital. But yeah, I probably could have found some scenarios where it wouldn't have been as intense as that,
Wow.
But yeah.
Wow. Yes. And you are very nostalgic. So tell me a little bit about the places you shoot and how a location can affect a story. Yeah.
So that also just started back there in Chad, the setting. You think about the parts of a story, character, setting, conflict, all of these things. And setting is like a huge part of a story. And so in terms of photography, I would say it's one of the most important elements of the story because say you decide to go shoot on a sunny day at the fair, like that mood immediately is playful, it's happy, it has the memories, that we all can think of what the fair feels like. And so you start with that mood just because of the setting. And then if you were to go to some broken down house and shoot, in that, with dark rooms and nobody's been living there for years and years, the setting like plays right in. I can only imagine what those pictures would look like. So setting to me, at the very base level where you're just looking at the physical setting is so important. And then you take it a next step and you think about like what a place means to somebody, and setting takes on like even more information to feed into that event that happens there. So like I was thinking of about one groom. He was not super excited about the idea of a big wedding, and his wife-to-be was saying like, I've always wanted a wedding, like just, having everybody there. And she was very well, I mean, in some ways she had lots of friends. So I just feel like she wanted everybody to be there. So they kind of worked together, and he was a biology major and super into animals, just kind of, now he's a biology teacher at a university, and they chose the living desert in down in Palm Springs, and that's where they got married. So they had like animal time, and they found a setting that kind of felt like them. And I could tell he like really enjoyed it. We did their portraits in like the botanical garden there, and people were holding lizards and snakes, and like, it was just like, it was very much them. So I think finding a setting that feels like you, of course, if it's a family property, that also, and that comes with its challenges. I got married on our family property, and it's a lot of work, but also some of those things can be really special. This isn't a wedding shoot, but one shoot I recently did for a family whose the grandparents were in their 80s, and the grandpa had been diagnosed with cancer, and they wanted to have their whole family come back to their original house that they built from the ground up and do like family pictures in that house and everything. Yeah, everything. And he had his room where he was receiving chemo, and then they had their bedroom, and, and the whole family came together there, and they just did everything that they would normally do at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Yeah. And she made all of the normal foods that she makes when they come. And the setting, I mean, I could tell that they hadn't done pictures for a long time. They said, we haven't done pictures a long time. What are we supposed to do? But once they got into that setting, they just did what they do there. Yeah. And we did some formal portraits and things like that, but you could tell they were relaxed, and there was a lot of emotion there too, things bubbling up to the surface, because of being in this spot. We did a picture in the hallway, where I'm sure that they had carried every one of their babies. They had 3 kids, every one of their babies through those hallways, and here they are with all their grandkids, walking these hallways. So it's just some of those places, like, they just set the mood. They're the setting of the story. So yeah, that's like, locations are super important to me. Like, I love to help people think about locations and where we could start, telling that story.
Because when I think of a location, I'm just like, okay, do we want to do a mountaintop? Do we want to go by a river?
Yes, and that's not bad either. Yeah.
But I think of more of it like aesthetic.
Yes.
I don't think necessarily the meaning behind it. It's going to look good.
Yeah.
Because that's where my eye to me is like, when I do someone's makeup, I'm like, what's going to fit pictures? What's going to fit personality? And I don't so much think about the setting. Yeah. And it could be, I still shoot on a lot of mountaintops. I still shoot in big fields. Yeah. So that's not wrong by any means. Sure. And sometimes like those things go hand in hand. Like you're at your grandparents' house and there's a field out back that you guys go to. So your eye is good too, is what I'm saying. But it's just, it's that other deeper level, what's going to put people in a mood, in a certain mood, thinking about the setting as a mood setter, too. Mood setter, yeah. And when I think your pictures are so much more vulnerable and raw, and the true emotion comes out. Mm-hmm. Because I know anytime we've had our pictures taken we have certain members of our family that are just like, I don't want to do it. I don't want to get pictures done. Like, it's not.
Yeah.
It's just like, okay, I'm just here.
Yes.
But if you put them at Grandma and Grandpa's house,
right, they are gonna be
like we have a picture of them in our hallway on the fence, and they're just playing.
Oh, and it's your favorite one.
Favorite photo. Because it's at Grandma and Grandpa's. And they're just doing what they do, and they're wearing their Carhartt, and
it's them. It's you. It's you.
Precious. Yeah. I'm like, this is my life.
Yes.
The smiles that I get to see every day come through, and not they're just like smiles.
Yeah.
Say please.
It is, and I totally get it that you and I are both in this stage where kids can be challenging to photograph, and that happens at weddings, it happens at family shoots. Like they're just not always in the mood to cooperate. But yes, but finding like what they're excited about, what the playful piece of them is. One family recently, they were a little bit older, and I'm still figuring out like what that junior high humor is. Like what makes them laugh, I don't know. So like the sibs, I was like, okay, like, can you just put him in a little headlock? I was moving into like a pose, but they took the headlock thing really serious, and all of a sudden like headlocks were happening. They were laughing so hard. I was like, oh, it's headlocks. So yeah, they like settled in and they were laughing, and it was perfect. But I was like, man, like every stage you're trying to find what is playful for these, and what is them, what is them in that moment. But yeah, that's a hard age.
Yeah, just tell boys to wrestle on it.
Yes, I think you're
fine. I think the girls are a little harder. I'm like, I don't know what.
Yeah, like I've got to think of some jokes or something. No.
Well, you're just so good at what you do and bringing out that nostalgia, and I love that. It's just amazing.
Thank you. It's fun to do.
Yes. Aside from what we talked about and bringing out the nostalgia in your clients, what are a couple goals that you have for your clients that work with you?
Yes. So I feel like one thing I would always want people to feel is like this set of images, when they look back, is them. Like I don't want to have something in mind for them that I push on them. Like I want them to feel settled into it. And that doesn't mean that I'm not going to come up with ideas, because sometimes people, like we were just talking, sometimes people might not think of something that is them, they might not think of grandparents' house as a spot to shoot. But I just would never want anybody to think, Emily's coming in with an agenda. She's going to tell me what I need to be. I might help you with your hands. Everybody wants help with their hands, but like, no, I want them to know that these pictures, when they come away, are one, they're them and it feels like them. And two, that no matter what happens, whether it's a family session or like a wedding where lots of moments happen, I hope that they get their gallery back and they actually love each other more because of what they see reflected back at them. I think in the moment, sometimes it's a lot of work getting ready for a wedding. It's a lot of work getting ready for a family shoot or whatever. It's just coordinating it. And but in the end, like if for that hour or that time there at the wedding, you can be present, and then it's my job to be teasing out all the moments that I see unfolding, and you get a gallery that you look and you cherish your people and your relationships more, because things bubble up in those pictures that you didn't see. You get to see your audience reacting. People, your great uncle who you didn't know cared so much, is dropping a tear, or there are people that there for you in your life that big events like weddings and big those emotions. I actually heard this really great way to describe emotion. It was saying that emotion is both good and bad is felt as impact, like a moment of impact. So, a super sad moment and a super happy moment might both be felt as impact. And so I think that a wedding day, even though it's a super happy day, it puts you in that state of everything bubbling up, and so many moments happen in those days that are emotional, and they're feelings that come to the surface. So my job is to be like watching for that. One of the ways that I do that is a questionnaire ahead of time, which can really help to understand. When I started I did not really get into weddings because of just like perfectly well-behaved families or family shoots because of the kids who will sit perfectly for me or like because of the perfect details, although everybody loves a really amazing detail to photograph. Sure. But it was more like that, those quirky relationships that, and just every story has some struggle too. So those are part of your story. So yeah, anyway, that questionnaire that I send out, I'll get back. And in there is one question, like, tell me, is there anything in your family, like a family dynamic that I should know about? Because like, did anybody pass away that it's sensitive? Is anybody going to be missing at this wedding that I should, so I'm not hollering around like, where's grandma? Where's grandma? Well, she just passed away, or not that you wouldn't want to recognize her there, but it's, or, are there any relationships, people who aren't getting along? So I can be sensitive to that because, like I said, weddings have big impact on all fronts. Any sad feelings might be felt super sad, and any happy feelings are going to be like elevated. So that questionnaire is really helpful to find out what things are at play in your story. And
I think that's so good because you don't just come at it with an artist's viewpoint of like, what are we capturing exactly? It's so relational. And I don't know. I'm just listening to you talk and I'm like, oh, I love this. It's soaking it in. It's incredible. And I know being on the front end, because I'm there when they're getting married. Yes. And I hear about those relationships.
I bet you hear everything, actually.
I do, because the mom is there, and the aunt is there, and the sister-in-law. And
you're probably the reason, your work is probably the reason that by the time I get there, people are feeling soothed.
I was talking with my other friend, Megan at Lovely Bridal Beauty. Megan, I don't know if you know her, but she does hair and makeup as well. And we find ourselves doing tandem with a lot. She'll do hair and I'll do makeup. And we were talking about how we just feel like emotional bodyguards. Yeah. And how we are
protecting.
Yeah, we're there to like protect the bride's energy and to allow her to not necessarily feel the conflict. Like if coming to her, it's like Aunt so-and-so is doing this, like, no, take it out.
That is so cool. I actually, can really see how you'd have a super important role right there because you're there from her face. Yeah.
An hour and I'm in the same room as all the bridesmaids.
Yeah.
4 to 5 hours usually on a wedding day.
Yes, it's very true.
And so you're there as kind of like this dynamic coach, like before you go to your photos. And then the service that I have started to provide is just kind of, I call it my fairy godmother services. I just am there with what I call my Mary Poppins bag, and I'm like, need a Band-Aid, need lip touch-up, needs a straw.
I love that.
But it's just like,
fairy godmother.
And the bride her water, and it's just like chucking snacks at people. I think it's the mom in me that's just like, what do you need?
I've got it in my Mary Poppins bag.
And the groom is like, I have a pimple. And I'm like, I got you. And just things like, just be almost
yes.
do that to him. I mean, I never do that. But like, just let me take micellar water on my hand and get that out.
Yes, you just want it to be.
But I just want them to feel good. Because there are those relationships and those moments and those times where there are going to be tears.
Yes.
And there are going to be those happy moments. But then I can also see when the bride is starting to shut down. Yeah. And I'm like, let's go sit down for 10 minutes.
Yeah. Take a break. Yeah.
And just kind of soothe that.
That's so good because that
thermometer,
that time frame too feels like they're finally sitting, like they've probably been running and doing, and so
it's usually that kind of it's like the downward, like the decompress, and then all of a sudden she gets nervous, and to be able to navigate those flows, but you have to do that with a group.
Yes,
with your photography.
Yes,
and I'm just there for one person and trying to make sure she stays even and stress and all those things.
Yeah, and so much. Sorry, I'm supposed to stay closer. So much in those moments of getting people at ease and putting people at ease and helping them be them is really affirming them who they are in that moment too. And so hearing stories, asking them questions. I know for me, like even sitting here, like hearing you affirm things, it makes me feel more confident, more calm, more present. Whereas I probably had some jitters sitting down here with you today, but I feel like just you affirming as you go and listening and hearing, and that is really powerful for people. And so I think in photography too, when you can be hearing a client and a couple and you're hearing their story, you're affirming who they are, you're affirming the choices they've made leading up to the wedding day. It's something that can put them at ease because I feel it for myself. It's what it does for me. So yeah, those are some things that my goals, definitely that their love would be reflected back to them in their gallery, that they would see not just the love between the two people, but like all the people that are there and loving you. Like never in your life will so many people come together for you, like not even your funeral. Like, and of course you won't be there for your funeral. So that stinks too. I'm like, everybody is there. So having that love reflected back to you, it is a powerful moment that, photographers get to deliver that back.
Well, and I was talking with a videographer too and talking about something very similar is you get to look back on those photos and the video and kind of relive that moment. Mm-hmm. Because we are in that business of like giving them moments and giving them feelings. And it's not just a product. It's not just, I'm going to take a picture.
Yeah.
And I think probably from your English / like kind of journalism point of view and way of seeing things, they probably get to look back on their gallery and relive the story.
I hope so.
Not just see individual photographs, but go, oh yeah, I remember that moment. It was right before grandma got on the dance floor. Yeah. And then I remember this moment. It was right before such and such happened. Yeah. They can go through and look, oh yeah, I didn't even see my uncle do that thing.
Right.
Just those little moments that you're kind of like that fly on the wall that just gets to capture the whole thing.
Yep, and then deliver them in a story setting. One of the things too with going back to what is authentic to them, I think a lot of people look to their photographer for knowing what aesthetically they should be doing. Yes. And for sure, like people will be like, what should I wear to my photo session? Well, most of the time I just say, just don't wear like bright, brilliant red dress. That's like my one thing. It's kind of hard to edit. But other than that, I'm like, I will tell me about you. Like, tell me are you a color person? Are you a neutrals person? Mm-hmm. But even on the wedding day, like this last month, I was down in Grants Pass, Oregon. Yeah. And like this super sweet couple, they're so fun and they had just fun style. But the husband, he works on cars. So, he was working on he was like, okay, Emily, I have to make a decision. I have these 2 vans and I could bring, he has like vintage vans that he works on. He's like, I have these 2 vans. I have this one over here. I've been working on it for somebody else. So it's almost done. It was actually this beautiful white, like camper van. Perfect. And then he said, but then there's this one too. It's red. And this is actually our van, but I call it rustic. And he's like, it's not as pretty. And, I looked at him, he's like, it's our van. I'm like, Merrick, this is your van. Like, and I was like, which one do you think, is gonna feel more like you? He's like, well, the red one, but it's just not as like pretty. Yeah. And I'm like, that is your van. Like, this is the one. And his wife, she loves that van, and they're going to fix it up. They're going to make it shiny. But I was like, of course, pick the one that is you. And that, I think people don't recognize the value in that. A photographer can make a junky van look amazing in photos, it's about what is you. Of course the white van got used for the gifts, so it was there. But I just think that in those moments, if people make authentic choices about what is them and not worrying too much about all the rights and wrongs of making it all look perfect, they're gonna sit in that van and kiss at the getaway, and they're gonna love it. And they did. It was so cute. Some of my favorite pictures. So
really, I think back on family photos, and we had family photos done recently, and they turned out fantastic. A lot of them were posed. The boys were not wearing Marvel characters. which is like 90% of their attire. But the photos that I love are just them like running around in our yard in their Crocs.
Yeah.
Like my son has this one pair of shorts that it literally has a hole on the back side of it because he wore them to the ground. We just call them the yellow shorts.
Yeah.
The yellow shorts. And I love photos of him in his
right.
yellow shorts.
I know. Why do we just love those? Yes. And they're beautiful. They are beautiful. And you think you think that you need to have this aesthetic that is perfect, but really you need your kids to be happy, or you need you need to be comfortable in that moment.
Yes.
You should always remember that for your family photos. My friend Jocelyn took some pictures for us once when my daughter was 3. And my daughter was just she was in that wanted to decide, what I'm about to say, she wanted to decide exactly what she was going to wear. So the whole family photo set, she is in her Elsa nightgown. And those pictures are some of my favorite. Thankfully, it was a little frilly, so it looked a little, but it's definitely, we're all styled and she is in an Elsa nightgown, but I love those pictures. Yeah. So it's not the end of the world. I think people have to remember having people happy and enjoying themselves, much more important.
Absolutely. If I could go back and do our wedding over again, granted it was 12 years ago, the style was totally different, but I would definitely want someone that just I want someone just to follow me around with the camera to capture moments. I don't want to spend 2 hours okay, now Auntie so-and-so get in. Smile again. Yes. That's just, it feels like 2 hours of just...
Yes. One of my best tips for that section of the day for anybody planning a wedding is make a solid list, a family photos list that is every combination that you want, and really think about those combinations. Are they really important? Are you going to ever use this picture, or is it one that's important? And if it is, put it on the list. And it can be a long list still, but have a list and then give it to your photographer. And then, when those family photos, formal photos happen there, they can have the list there. They can be moving down the list, and anybody, because every time in that time, everybody is saying, well, what about this? And so, and we got to do one with the aunties from that side, which maybe you do. And photographers are totally flexible, but for the couple, I feel like a photographer can kind of safeguard their time and their what's important to them. And then the photographer can tell everybody else, and I'm here at the reception for you. So anybody else who wants a picture, I'm there, come and find me. Yes. So because that time can be, the 2 hours of that would be overwhelming.
Yes. Well, and you can also say it's not on my list, but if you have more time.
Yeah, that's a great,
makeup, it never fails, so-and-so.
Somebody
not on the list is
can you do my makeup?
I'm well, these are the people that are on the list, they're priority, and this is who I came for today.
Yeah.
If I have more time at the end, I'll let you know.
That's really nice of you. Yeah. Yeah.
It doesn't always happen because you have a schedule.
Right. And then your job is to keep that for them and make their priorities first.
Yes. And so being able to tell the bride beforehand, this is what we can do. And then you can be the bad guy.
Yes. Oh, yes.
Because you don't want the bride to be the bad guy on that day and be oh, sorry, you're not on the list. You could just be this is it.
This is what we're doing now, and the rest are at the reception, so find me then. Perfect. And that's definitely something that I think when there's not a list, it's more stressful for the couple, for sure.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, kind of segueing off that a little bit, what's one piece of advice you'd give to somebody looking for a photographer for their wedding day?
Let's see. I mean, one is to for sure see full galleries, and that's something. There's so many good photographers out there. There really are, and Spokane is very blessed with a lot. So I think you'll find lots of options, but asking to see full galleries, and most photographers will give those to you from the get-go, because you want to see how, the proportions of the day, is this photographer's, is their focus on the details? Is it on the guests? Is it on portraiture? And then you have to align your values. If you're somebody who actually really mostly cares about some of those portraits of just you and your partner, then you find the right person who focuses on that. If you're somebody who wants candids, and a majority of candids, you can see that in a full gallery. Whereas we just have Instagrams that we put, one picture up here, one picture there with a caption.
Yep.
So that's probably my biggest piece of advice, is to find your match through looking at their work in a full format. And then from there, the connection is also super important. Somebody who just aligns with your values, and then have a family photos list. That's my other one.
Oh, yeah. Get organized and keep all those things together. Well, thank you, Emily, for joining me today.
Yes.
So good.
Thank you for having me. You put me at ease for sure, more than, you doing a podcast. You're just, it's the first time for everything, and you're so easy to talk to.
Good.
So
that's the hope. I just hope it's a conversation that just so happens to be recorded.
I love it.
So.
I love that. That's great.
Thank you.
Yes.